Harry the Hammer with further review by Housecrafters. Housecrafters provides complete home renovation services with one call does it all. That includes exterior home services like roofing, siding, home additions, and much more. Call 716-626-NAIL.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Further Review podcast. I am Jay Skurski for the Buffalo News, joined by Perryn Keys, back from Atlanta. And Perryn, the only thing scarier than the Bills' performance is the Atlanta airport at 7 a.m., but we were able to survive and make it back. Let's get right to it. Ugly. Ugly is probably the word that defines the Bills' effort Monday night down in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. A lot to cover in this one, but I think we've got to start with the offense, because if you're gonna assign blame to one side of the ball, I think it rests there mostly after 14 points scored. What were your biggest takeaways after digesting the Bills' performance Monday night?
Well, if we're going to start with the offense, sure. You touched on it right away. Obviously, 14 points is not going to get it done in many NFL games, just generally speaking. They scored right out of the gate. They went deep to Josh Palmer, very aggressive out of the gate. They score at the start of the first half. They score at the start of the second half, sort of recalibrated coming out of an ugly, ugly first half. But they fell asleep. I don't know how else to put it. They sort of fell, whether they tried to or not, they fell asleep at the end, the rest of the first half, fell asleep the rest of the second half. And if you want to take the 30,000-foot view, I've been thinking a lot about this over the past 2 weeks following the losses. But Jay, you and I have talked about this, as has the rest of Western New York, about how really the offense and the team in general hasn't played a full 60 minutes, hasn't played a complete game. And, if we want to take that and narrow it down to just the offense, we talk a lot about the everybody eats mentality. That's Joe Brady's philosophy. And I've been thinking about that a lot. That's not a new philosophy for Joe Brady. That's something he's been saying since 2019 when he was at LSU, which is where I've got a first-hand close-up view of him. That was his big break, right? He wasn't offensive coordinator by title, but that's essentially what he was. He was running the offense, and that worked. It worked. That was one of the maybe the best offense in the history of college football. Certainly up there, in the conversation, and it worked to perfection. Now, there's something to talk about that, though, with that offense. Joe Burrow, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and a couple offensive linemen that all made it to the NFL. And your top 4 skill position players were all first-round picks. Now you're looking around at the Bills' offense, and I don't mean this in a mean-spirited way, but this goes back to what we're talking about and what I think we're going to talk about with this offense. You're talking about receivers that aren't getting a lot of separation. And the difference between Jefferson and Chase, not only in the NFL, but certainly in college, is that they were getting separation. And they were so far better than the competition, not only at the pro level, but certainly back then at the college level. So does the everybody eats mentality, the everybody eats philosophy work when you don't have players that are significantly better? Do you have that one guy? You want to use a basketball mentality, when you're having a cold spell, do you have that one guy you just you toss in the basketball to him and say, okay, we need a basket, go here, take the ball, go get a basket. Again, we're seeing the same thing over and over. No separation, or very little separation from the wide receivers. Keon Coleman, you can say, doesn't matter as much because he's good with he's good with contested catches. But elsewhere, the jet sweep call to Elijah Moore on 3rd and short, it's an oddball head scratcher kind of call. One among many that we've seen lately when James Cook is not on the field. James Cook only gets 7 carries in the first half. And then Josh Allen, look, he's the reigning MVP for a reason. You don't want anybody else at the controls. But by the same token, this is Jim Kubiak did his whole column for us at the Buffalo News um, last week about how he started to force try to sort of start to force the issue against the Patriots last week, and we saw some of that I think again this week when they start getting down. You start to go in maybe to 15% panic mode or something like that. He had Shavers open last night on third down, and he didn't see it. He forced obviously a throw down the middle late in the first half, and maybe tried to do too much there late in the game and threw another interception. So there's a lot going on there with that offense. And yeah, anything else you want to add there, Jay? Because there's plenty going on.
To answer your question about, can it work? I mean, they finished number 2 in the league last year in scoring, right? So
Yeah.
it can work. It's just not right now. And, you take out Dalton Kincaid. He's been a big part the first 5 weeks. How much does that change the way that the Falcons were able to defend the Bills? I think that was certainly, a factor in this game. But you can't attribute it all to just Dalton Kincaid not being there, right? And, the guys that they do have shown they can be better. They need to be better, right? That starts with Keon Coleman. 3 catches for 11 yards is just not enough production.
Harry the Hammer here. Heating and cooling your home is getting very expensive. Replacing your windows is the best way to keep those costs down. Right now, Housecrafters is offering triple pane windows for the price of double pane windows. Call Housecrafters at 646-NAIL.
Moving on to the defense, Jay, from the frying pan to the skillet. 335 yards allowed by the defense in the first half alone. Give them credit, I will say, in the third quarter and for much of the fourth quarter, they buckled down a little bit. They gave the offense a chance. The offense didn't take it, or didn't take it all the way to the point that they could have to get themselves into a tie with the Atlanta Falcons. But boy, that was in a year that has been pretty doggone ugly at times. This had to have been the ugliest first half of football that they've had. I was gonna say certainly all year, maybe in the entire time you've been covering the Buffalo Bills. I don't know, Jay. Tell me what you thought about all that. If there was anything good to say about it.
Well, defensively in the first half, absolutely not. There was not. I mean, an embarrassing number. And I say this without hyperbole. Had that last play gone for a touchdown, right? And Drake London is out, a foot before the end zone, and the Bills get out of there without allowing any points. But I literally think that would have been a fireable offense for someone. And I'm not the type of guy that's firing people on social media after a bad half of football or a bad game even. But that is the type of inexcusable error that just can't happen. And I think it was a microcosm.
That's the word right there. I don't mean to cut you off, Jay, but that's the word right there. Inexcusable.
Yeah, it is. It is inexcusable. And I know they're dealing with injuries on that side of the ball. I know they're waiting for guys that are suspended to get back who they think will help this defense. That's all fine and well, but it's another game where they're not ready to play at the start defensively. And I talked to Taron Johnson about this after the game, and I'm going to plan on writing something in some way, shape, or form on it. But what happens is, they deserve credit for the second half. No question about it. They turned things around, but they put themselves in a position defensively where they have to play a perfect game in the second half, and that's not easy to do. They only allow 3 points. Well, guess what? Those were the deciding 3 points in the game. That ended the game, right? And the only reason that the defense is in that situation is because of their absolute inability to do anything right in the first half. So whether it's lining up offside on the first play of the game, Sean McDermott, I couldn't even get the question out to Sean McDermott before he started answering it about the penalties. We're going to get to that later in the show. But the issues defensively for me are just, boy, it looks easy for these teams. It looks easy, whether it's gap integrity and whatever that means, and the idea of not being in the right place at the right time for the run defense. This soft zone is just, being picked apart. And, this is astounding. They gave up catches to one Atlanta Falcons receiver last night. One, Drake London. However, 10 catches, something like 160 yards. Don't have the exact total right in front of me. Might have been 157.
158.
Yeah, 158. Thank you. Yeah, a ridiculous number, right? And so, too easy for Drake London, especially when you consider their number 2 and number 3 options in the passing game, at least at wide receiver, were not involved in the game. They were out of the game because of injury. And so the Bills had to have known that Drake London was going to see, the majority of the targets. Double them. Do something. Change what you're doing. And the lack of adjustments. I understand maybe they made adjustments at halftime and it led to a better defensive effort in the second half. But where are those adjustments in game? How do they avoid getting it to that point or letting it get to that point where they're forced to say, okay, if we're not absolutely perfect here in the second half, we may not win the game.
Nothing more I can add to that other than yes, missed tackles continue to be. We're going to discuss that a little bit too, but missed tackles. I would love to. We haven't seen the all 20. I haven't seen the all 22 yet, as we're recording this on Tuesday morning. Missed tackles continue to be a problem. I can't imagine what PFF's going to have to say about this. Bad, in my opinion, bad angles, particularly again, not to pile on to one position or another because everybody's got a fair amount of blame to have to accept in this matter. But particularly the safety positions are taking bad angles and certainly not wrapping up. I was going to say against the run, but I thought they were a little bit late a lot of times in pass coverage too, closing in on the receivers and tight ends. So I don't know what else you listen. Another thing to be said here too. Bijan Robinson, maybe one of the best running backs in the NFL. So look, he's going to make a lot of guys look foolish, but there's just no way to get around this. You just as you said, Jay, you can't. God bless for tightening up in the second half, but to have to play perfect over the course of 2 quarters and not be able to have any room for error. And let's not forget, look, they were maybe were it not for Greg Rousseau's blocked field goal, they would have been down more. It would not have had the position to be, would not have been in the position to be able to close even farther. So, listen, there's a lot of things to cover here, and we're going to get to injuries a little bit later. But certainly, you're missing a couple of your top playmakers, and that plays in a part of it. But listen, this is the NFL, next man up. And you can't get away with some of the things you're getting away with here. So, well, you didn't get away with some of the things you're getting away with here. So, plenty of things to clean up and plenty of things to take into consideration as the Bills go into maybe a perfectly timed bye week.
And Perryn, I mentioned it there previously, but penalties again proved to be an issue. Well, maybe not overwhelming in the terms of numbers, the type and the timing of them are just killer. And it was 5 for 40 in the first half, but you look at those. One of them erases a takeaway on the first play of the game. Later in the game, Ed Oliver lines up offside. It erases a sack. So you're getting these penalties that are massively costly, just in terms of what they do to the momentum in the football game, right? A turnover is a major play. A sack is a major play. And, it's the type that are just maddening because there's no, we can hang this on coaching, right? And we can say that they're not ready to go, but does Greg Rousseau need to be coached to stay onside? Like, I mean, really, he doesn't. And it's just, it's a mental error. The troubling thing is that they continue to be made, and I don't know how you police it. I mean, Sean McDermott says that they work on it in practice, they drill on it in practice, and then it doesn't show up when you get to the game. So I don't know what the answer is there, but it's not just the sheer number, but it's the type and it's the situational penalties that are really hurting this team. I mean, a good example is in the second half. You get a holding call on a punt return that costs 21 yards of field position when you're trying to tie the game. There's a big difference between starting at your 20 and starting at your 41, and that's what the Cam Lewis holding does. And so, it's bad enough when you're not playing well offensively, defensively, special teams-wise, but to continually shoot yourselves in the foot with these penalties is making it even more difficult for the Bills.
Absolutely. Listen, 30 accepted penalties in the past 3 games. This is uncharacteristic too. Now, if we're talking about things that are uncharacteristic of the Bills, at the top of the show we talked about, Joe Brady's offense that worked certainly to a T for a long portion of the season last year. and is suddenly not working now, even without star players. Well, that's one thing that's not working. Uh, the Bills in general not killing themselves with mistakes is one of the things that's not working right now. 30 accepted penalties in the last 3 games, and they're one of the, they were setting records for turnovers, right? For turnover margin. They were -2 yet again in the turnover category last night, Monday night. So one of those another one of those things where they are now making the mistakes that those other teams that they relied on those other teams to make to help themselves. They were going to rely on the other team to make the mistakes to help them beat themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I cover this. This has sort of been key and central to the Sean McDermott era, right? You're going to make the other team go the length of the field. This was central to what he did. I covered a team that was coached by Pete Richardson, an ex-Buffalo Bill who played years and years ago for the Bills in the 60s, back in the Rock Pile era. And his philosophy was he was a defensive coach, and his philosophy was, hey, look, we're going to keep everything in front of us, make them go the length of the field, and at some point they're gonna kill themselves with a penalty or a bad mistake or a turnover or something like that. And that's kind of cut from the same cloth, but it's not happening right now. You mentioned penalties at the wrong time. 3rd and 14, pass interference on Benford, gives the Falcons a fresh set of downs. Jumping off sides on a critical 3rd down late, gives the Falcons, allows them to bleed the clock a little bit longer, kick a field goal, pretty much ice the game. So all those things are going wrong. It's, maybe this is a rash that just sort of kind of course corrects because of numbers and kind of smooths out because who knows why? Because Greg Rousseau happens to jump off sides now and he happens to not jump off sides later. Who knows? I'm not sure. Maybe it's a numbers game that sort of smooths itself out, just like the turnovers. Maybe Josh Allen is a little less careless. Maybe he doesn't try to push it a little bit as much later on in the season, something like that. But another thing too, we need to do. I know we were going to talk about injuries too, Jay. This is certainly something we probably ought to talk about too. Terrell Bernard, it looks like he's got an ankle that we have no idea, at least at this point, how severe that may or may not be. We still don't know about Matt Milano, how long he may be. Max Hairston, who they thought they were going to have to rely on. I don't know about you, but I think seems like he's more or less destined for a red shirt at this point. Maybe it's a little bit too early to call that right now, but I just don't know how it's going to take a while for him to ramp all the way up, and then once you do, you're going to get into the sort of the meat of the home stretch, and do you want to rely on does Sean McDermott in particular want to rely on a rookie like that? Dalton Kincaid, you mentioned, just a huge part of the offense this season. Leading receiver, he's out with an oblique last night. Daquan Jones gets hurt in warm-ups. He hurts his calf. TJ Sanders on IR. DeMar Hamlin on IR. You group all this stuff up with, suddenly an uncharacteristic, un-Bills-like team that's hurting itself with a bunch of mistakes, penalties, and turnovers. Yeah, all of a sudden you're looking like a team that can't play a complete game, much less a team that doesn't play a complete game. I don't know where that leaves you.
Yeah, I mean, Sean McDermott said after the game, injuries are not an excuse, and I'm not trying to use it as an excuse, but they are a factor, right? And certainly they were a factor last night, both in terms of who was not available for the game at the start, including Daquan Jones, and then who left the game, right? Josh Palmer had made 2 big plays for the offense, and he gets hurt on the second of those. He's 60 yards receiving, leads the team on just 2 catches. He was brought in to be the man beater, right? He was brought in to be the guy who could get that separation. And without without him on the field, we saw that the offense really, really struggled. So you add him to the list with Kincaid, and the receiving group certainly looked a lot less potent. And so I think mostly these injuries are defensively, right? We're talking about, but we can't forget the Kincaid and Palmer factor. How does that change the offense will they be ready after the bye week? There's a lot of questions. We know Sean McDermott is generally pretty loath to give much by way of meaningful injury updates, so I don't expect we'll hear a ton of news today. But, you said earlier in the show that the bye week is coming at the right time. I think that's multiple reasons. Number one, they need to get healthy. Number two, they've got a lot to figure out as a coaching staff, but they got to get some of these guys back. And, you ran down the list. I won't touch on all of them, but I think we will see Hairston at some point. I mean, he's been working pretty hard off to the side, but they got to open his window first here. And so I would expect that when they get back from the bye that they'll open the practice window. That gives him 3 weeks that they have to decide. So, yeah, you're talking pretty deep into the season. It might not be until week 10 that we see him on the field, but given where they're at cornerback, I think they're going to want to get him out there at some point during the regular season.
Jay, just a few weeks ago, we were talking about, well, let's not worry so much about the state of the AFC East. Let's talk about the AFC in general. And, of course, we were talking about the Packers running the NFC and the Chargers maybe as the dark horse for AFC challenging the Bills. Well, we're going to have to walk that back for quite a while now. Let's talk about the AFC East. The Bills and the Patriots are tied, but, of course, the Patriots really are in first place because they have the head-to-head tiebreaker. So let's talk about them. They have the Titans, Browns, Titans, Browns, and Falcons coming up, and the Buccaneers after that. They'll be favored at least in 2 of those games, if not 3. On the Bills, when they come out of that bye, they'll have Carolina. Well, let's just talk about the receivers first that they're going to face. They'll have Carolina. That's Ted McMillan as their number 1 receiver. Good rookies, probably on a pace for close to 1,000-yard season. Kansas City, that's Worthy and Rice. Of course, Miami's having not a great season. Probably looking at a turnover here, but they do have Jalen Waddle, and of course they gave the Bills a fight at home. And then Tampa Bay was pretty beat up, but they found a way to win again. And they've got a great rookie, probably Rookie of the Year right now, in Emeka Ibuka. And, of course, Mike Evans, the great veteran who's headed to Canton. So they've got their work cut out for them as we go down the road.
Yeah, I mean, we'll start with the Patriots. I mean, that win over Buffalo was massive for a number of different reasons. Number one, what it, I think, meant for their confidence in terms of where they're at under Mike Vrabel in their first year. They look like a darn good team, right? And they continued that with a road win. I know the Saints are record-wise not having a great year, but we saw them against the Bills give them a fight. And so New England got what they needed, right? And what they needed was a victory there. And that upcoming schedule for New England all but assures, at least in my mind, that they're going to hang around and that this is going to be a fight for the division. This is not going to be a coronation like it was last year on December 1st for the Bills in terms of the AFC East. Bills, obviously, as we've discussed a lot here in this show, have a lot of things to figure out. And, the Patriots, given the quality of their upcoming opponents, especially immediate opponents, I think, are going to be right there, either tied with or even maybe ahead of the Bills in the AFC East. Beyond that, I mean, the Jets are, that's a mess, and Miami, that's a mess. That's a game that they probably feel like they should have won against the Chargers. They're not able to pull it out. Bad teams have a way of losing games, right? We've seen that very often. I think the Jets and the Dolphins, that applies to both of them. They both had games that they probably feel like today or yesterday that they should have won and didn't. So it does feel to me like this is shaping up very much to be a 2-team race in the AFC East.
Yeah, no, I don't think there's any question. I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but boy, I could not have been any more wrong about the Jets and about Aaron Glenn specifically. Excuse me. We don't need to spend a ton of time on the Jets, obviously, but gee whiz, I really thought he was going to infuse them with a whole lot of toughness, and he was going to make every one of those. Well, he did. That was a competitive game, but they're 0-6, and man, we're way, way, way too early. Dan Campbell struggled in his first year with the Lions, but I don't know what else to say about those guys. I thought they were going to be a whole lot more competitive under Aaron Glenn. I thought he was going to infuse a whole lot more toughness within them, and they look like the Jets. The Dolphins are that much more of a mess. They might be every bit as much of a mess as the Jets are, frankly, and we could be looking at a complete overhaul down in Miami as well. So it's the Patriots and the Bills, and I mean I know we've discussed this before, but I think we all think quite highly of Mike Vrabel, and they're certainly playing sort of according to his personality too. And you didn't get the chance to step on their throat, and so you might be dealing with them from now until the start of January. And they've certainly got the immediate schedule right now that sort of plays into their hands in terms of them feeling like they've got a lot to play for and a lot of confidence moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And that race for the division will continue for the Bills in 2 weeks, as of course they are on bye in week 7. That means that Perryn and I will be back on October 27th, it'll be. That will be the Monday following the game in Carolina against the Panthers in week 8. For Perryn Keys, I'm Jay Skurski. Thanks so much for watching the Further Review podcast here at BuffaloNews.com.
This is Harry the Hammer for Further Review by Housecrafters. Housecrafters provides complete home renovation services with one call does it all. That includes interior home services as well as windows and doors. Call 716-626-NAIL.